Shocking moment, billionaire sees his ex-wife with a baby that's his mini-me at 30,000 feet. Chad Sterling sat frozen in his first-class seat, staring out the window as the clouds rolled by like confused sheep. He rubbed the bridge of his nose, fighting off the pounding headache that had turned his trip to New York into a nightmare. Everything about this flight felt off, the turbulence had been relentless. But nothing prepared him for the sight that struck him like a lightning bolt. In the row ahead, there she was, his ex-wife, Sophie, gazing down at a baby who looked so eerily like him it sent chills racing down his spine. The world outside the aircraft vanished, swallowed whole by his mounting disbelief. How? Why? Questions buzzed in his mind, a swarm of angry hornets. He had thought he put Sophie behind him, a ghost haunting old memories, yet here she was, cradling a child that may very well have been his, at 30,000 feet. Just then, the baby let out a cry so piercing it sliced through the white noise of the plane. Sophie instantly rocked the little one, her face lighting up with a fierce sense of joy that twisted his stomach. Chad's heart pounded, each beat echoing louder than the roar of the engines. It couldn't be this baby, couldn't he possibly be his? Could she have married someone else? Or had she come back into his life to drop this bombshell? A raspy murmur rippled through the back of the plane. Other passengers had caught the action too, and whispers swirled around Chad like a tornado. Is that her kid? Looks just like him. His face burned with a mixture of curiosity and dread. Could it be that she had moved on, yet still carried a piece of him, a tiny reminder aboard this colossal metal tube? The air felt thick as he fought to keep his composure, clenching his fists until his knuckles turned white. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. Chad leaned forward, heart racing, his breath quickening as he watched Sophie fumble with her purse. Was she reaching for a birth certificate? A photo? The shadows in the cabin shifted as people leaned in closer, the collective tension palpable. After what felt like an eternity, she pulled something out, and Chad could hardly breathe, his chest tightening with fear. What revelation was she about to offer? What would he do if it contained the truth he feared most, a name that connected him to this child, binding them forever? He needed answers, and fast, but could he handle what was about to unfold? The plane shook again, but this time it was his world that felt like it was being tossed into chaos. Could he muster the courage to confront her? Or would he be left spiraling in confusion while the child, a mirror image of his past, slipped farther away? Chad's breath caught in his throat as the object in Sophie's hand unfurled. He squinted, trying to catch a glimpse of whatever would confirm or shatter his reality. Other passengers were equally entranced, their hushed whispers now morphed into murmurs of confusion, excitement, and judgment. Is she about to name him? One woman ahead whispered, leaning into her husband's shoulder. This is crazy. Cool sweat trickled down Chad's back. He needed to act, needed to bridge the 10 feet that divided them in the narrow aisle. He fought the impulse to leap up, to shout at her, demand answers. But a heaviness weighed him down, tethering him to his seat, a mix of a silent plea and dread. The cabin's sunlight cut through the chaos as it hit the crumpled paper, revealing a photo, Sophie smiling blissfully, the baby nestled in her arms, their eyes locked together in a moment of untold tenderness. And right there, the undeniable truth, the baby had his eyes. The same deep, stormy blue that haunted his own reflection. It felt like an electric shock to his system, jolting him. Chad, look! A voice pulled him back, the flight attendant, eyes wide with concern. Are you all right? No. I'm not, he snapped, almost too loud, his tone sharp enough to sting the air. Can you keep it down? Someone's about to say something important. As panic bubbled, he noticed other passengers shifting in their seats, casting wary glances toward him. The tension grew, thick as fog, wrapping around him like a vice. The closer he got to uncovering the truth, the further he felt from the solid ground of understanding that he composed himself, forcing his heart rate to slow, but it was difficult with every twist and turn of his thoughts. What was she doing up there? Did she plan this flight? Was it a coincidence? Perhaps this child was a calculated effort to draw him back in. Feelings he thought he had buried clawed their way up, rearing up and nearly throwing him off balance. Chad watched Sophie turn to the baby, whispering soft words that inexplicably turned his gut. She was a mother now, and part of him couldn't help but admire her warmth, her instinct. But the other part, the darker part, simmered with jealousy and resentment. From a few rows behind, he heard snippets of conversations rising like steam. It's definitely his. Do you think he even knows? What a scandal this is, he felt exposed, as if every gaze was cutting into him. He glanced out the window, hoping to find solace in the clouds, but it was a false escape. The ground below felt like a chasm, ready to swallow him whole. Suddenly, Sophie looked over her shoulder, her gaze locking onto his. Just like that, a wall of silence enveloped them. A realization flickered in her eyes, the same flicker of recognition that ignited his confusion within him. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came. Chad's heart raced anew. Now or never. This was the moment. He needed to know her reasons, the life choices that had led her here, to this very point in time. He was no longer merely a spectator, he was ready to ascend from the shadows of uncertainty. Is he mine? The words escaped his lips before he could stop them. Raw and desperate, passengers stopped breathing, even the flight attendant stood frozen. All eyes fell to Sophie, awaiting her response. Chad braced for the storm, but what would tumble from her mouth? The plane lurched again, and the sudden shift sent his heart into his throat as he prepared for the whirlwind of truth that was about to unravel. Would she tell him the story he dreaded, or would she turn his world upside down once more, with the future hanging on the precipice? The one question lingered: was he ready for the truth? Sophie's gaze fell like a hammer on an anvil, heavy and unyielding. The atmosphere was so thick with tension it felt like the cabin might crack under the pressure. She inhaled sharply, every eye in the plane focused on her. The silence stretched like a taut wire. Yes, she finally whispered, but it was more than just a word, it was a confession, a promise, a reckoning. The murmurs began anew, louder this time, spilling over every boundary of decorum. Passing glances turned into a cascade of disbelief. Did she just say what I think she said? Someone gasped from a few rows back. Chad's heart hammered in his chest, suffocating him. His fingers gripped the armrest, knuckles going white. Was this really happening? This wasn't just a flight anymore, it was an episode of a twisted reality show. Would people in his life now see this as a scandal? Would they judge him? Sophie stood, the baby cradled in her arms, and began to walk toward him in slow, hesitant steps. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats, uncertain if they should witness what was unfolding. His pulse quickened. Every fraction of a second felt like an eternity. The world around him faded, all he could see was Sophie, the baby, and the impending storm of emotions rushing toward them. I never wanted to hurt you, she said, her voice shaky but steady, reaching him over the noise. You deserve to know the truth, Chad. Chad opened his mouth to respond, but the words jammed in his throat. What could he say that wouldn't sound weak or desperate? Instead, he met her gaze, a silent plea hanging in the air between them. As Sophie stopped just shy of his aisle, the baby cooed softly, and for a fleeting moment, the chaos melted away into something gentle. The child's blue eyes twinkled like diamonds, and every hair on Chad's body stood at attention. It was as if he could feel the weight of destiny pressing down on him. But why now? Why here? His voice barely rose above a whisper, words tumbling out, raw with desperation and confusion. Because she paused, glancing back at the passengers, I wanted to do this face to face. I didn't want you to hear it from someone else, or see it in the tabloids. A snicker cut through the tension, and someone muttered, fancy a love story, huh? The chuckle spread like wildfire, stinging Chad with the sharp blade of judgment. It pressed down on him, making his chest tighten. Sophie pressed on, "Chad, it was never just about us. I didn't plan this. I was scared, and I thought scared." "Scared of what?" The words burst from him, tinged with bitterness. "Of our life together? Of us?" "No. Scared of being alone after everything that happened, after you." The flight attendant's stoic face now resembled a gallery of astonished figures, her mouth slightly agape as she tried to navigate the fallout unfolding. Chad could feel the air constricting, each breath a struggle. Sophie's confession hovered, waiting to drop like a heavy stone on his already fractured heart. An unsettling realization blossomed in Chad's mind as he looked from Sophie to the baby. Could he truly be tied to this life? His past seeped into the present like a dark cloud, threatening to swallow him whole. Did he even want to be a part of this? Before he could collect his thoughts, Sophie continued, conviction in her voice. "He needs you, Chad. I need you. I thought you would want to know him, want to fight for him." Suddenly, the plane jolted yet again, shaking them back into the reality around them. Passengers gasped, and for a moment, chaos replaced clarity. Chad felt the ground he stood on grow unstable, mirroring his own internal turbulence. "Is it too late?" he asked, his voice trembling, a whisper barely heard over the rumble of the plane. Too late for what? The question hung in the air, heavy with possibility and dread. What if it was too late for them? As he stared at the boy's innocent face, a truth deeper than the depth of the ocean weighed down on him. What if this child was his last chance at redemption? Chad's heart raced, thoughts spiraling in every direction. A storm was brewing. The only question now was, he ready to face it? The plane steadied, but the tension didn't. It vibrated through the cabin, thick like the fog that rolled into a sleepy town. Chad's heartbeat echoed in his ears, drowning out the chatter around him. The murmurs crescendoed, a mixture of shock and intrigue weaving through each passenger's whisper. They were captivated, like children huddled around a fire, waiting for a ghost story to unfold. Chad shifted in his seat, desperate for clarity. Sophie's face was a tapestry of fear and determination. Was she truly asking him to step into this chaotic web of a life they had never planned? The baby, cradled like a fragile secret, wiggled, and Chad's breath hitched as he caught himself staring at the boy. There was a resemblance of familiarity that drew him in with magnetic force. Suddenly, the realization crashed over him. Was he part of this? With every beat of his heart, doubt gnawed at him, flaring into fierce questions. What if he needs me but I can't? What if I'm not ready for this? His hands shook slightly, betraying his inner turmoil. A woman across the aisle leaned in, her interest piqued, eyes wide. "Oh, my God, this is real drama," she whispered audibly. Chad turned sharply towards her, almost pleading. The eyes of strangers felt heavy on him, judging, speculating. "Chad," Sophie's voice broke through the fog, reverberating in his mind, "it could be beautiful. We could be a family. The word echoed in his thoughts, bouncing around like a kid's toy in a washing machine. The memory of their past laughter, joy, heartbreak flashed before him. When had life turned into a series of choices that led them here, at 30,000 feet with a baby who held the potential for redemption? Before he could form a coherent response, the overhead lights flickered, casting ominous shadows over their faces. The pilot's voice came through the speakers, steady yet serious. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've encountered some turbulence. Please fasten your seatbelts." Turbulence. A fitting metaphor. Chad's heart sank deeper. Was this a sign? An omen they desperately needed to heed? The cabin shuddered as if the plane itself was on the brink of splitting apart, mirroring Chad's frayed emotions. Sophie's eyes sparkled with determination, yet they bore the heaviness of unspoken fears. "I can't do this alone," she pleaded, the urgency in her voice drawing his gaze back. "I never wanted it this way, but we can't ignore what's happening." "Not anymore." Chad's throat constricted. Her vulnerability cut to the bone. She needed him. But could he be who she needed? Questions swirled like a tempest, and he felt the edges of his resolve beginning to fray. "What about everything we've been through?" he finally managed, voice strained. Do you really think that's all behind us? Can we just move on? We can't erase the past, but we can write a new chapter, Sophie insisted, her hands gripping the edge of the seat like a lifeline. He deserves a chance, Chad. We deserve a chance. With each passing second, the noise around them faded, leaving just the two of them in a void. His mind raced. The faces of the passengers blurred into a background murmur. Did he even know what the word chance meant anymore? Then, he glanced at the baby again, so innocent, so full of possibility. The storm within him raged, but there was something in the boy's gaze, a flicker of connection that made Chad's heart swell. That a sharp jolt rocked the plane, tipping them sideways. Gasps erupted, and the cabin erupted into chaos. Not this now. Chad's stomach twisted as screams erupted, metal creaking, uncertainty taking root. Sophie grabbed his arm, her grip fierce. Chad. Panic mingled with hope in her voice. The turbulence was relentless now, but beneath it, another truth sparked. Did he want to embrace this storm with her? At that moment, as the plane pitched and dove, the question hung heavily between them. Before he could reply, another shudder rocked the cabin, sending a collective gasp through the passengers. His heart pounded as their eyes locked, and in that fleeting moment, he saw not just fear but resolve. Mirroring his own, what happens when you embrace the storm instead of running from it? It was a revelation that might change everything. And as another howl of wind rumbled through the aisle, a part of him was finally ready to fight, if only to uncover the secrets waiting to be revealed. What if this turbulence was merely a prelude to something far more dangerous? Something hiding, lurking in the shadows of their past? The plane dipped again, and Chad's stomach lurched. With each jolt, the reality of the moment began to sink deeper into his bones. Screams echoed, mingling with the sharp sounds of panic, people fumbling to hold on to anything, praying for safety. Chad grasped the armrest, knuckles white. Sophie's grip on him tightened, her eyes wide with fear and adrenaline. I can't believe this is happening. She shouted over the cacophony as the cabin lights flickered once more, plunging them into a brief darkness. When the light returned, it cast an eerie glow over the passengers' fearful faces, wide-eyed and fearful, reflecting the sudden storm both inside and outside the plane. Chad tried to focus. What's our next move? He managed to utter, though his thoughts were a swirl of chaos and uncertainty. Could they act like a family when the winds were threatening to tear them apart? Together, Sophie insisted, her voice a vibrant ember amidst all the fear. But first, we need to survive this. Those words struck him like a bolt of lightning, igniting something inside him. A need to protect, to fight. He glanced at the baby, nestled in Sophie's arms, blissfully unaware of the pandemonium surrounding them. Innocent. So perfectly delicate. Suddenly, a loud bang jolted through the aircraft, rattling overhead compartments and sending bags tumbling to the floor. A collective gasp swept through everyone. Out of instinct, Chad leaned closer to Sophie, shielding her and the infant with his body. Chad! She screamed, her voice now full of raw panic. Do you think we'll make it? This is insane. Listen to me, he replied, urgency sharpening his words. We have to focus. Find a life vest or something, anything we can use. Why are you talking about that? She shot back. There's no time for, but the turbulence struck harder, the plane listing dangerously. Fellow passengers braced themselves, some praying, others tearing at their seatbelts. The woman from across the aisle was now on her feet, shouting for help. All Chad could think about was the baby in Sophie's grasp. In the midst of the storm, a startling thought surfaced. Had they truly reached the end of everything? Or had they simply come to the beginning of something else? It shook him, a realization that perhaps chaos was necessary to find their path, even in the face of such tumult. Sophie, he breathed, trying to make himself heard over the chaos. We have to get out of here. There could be life vests in the overhead bins. Just trust me. Before she could respond, the lights went out again. In that moment of darkness, Chad felt a sense of urgency ascend. It was now or never. Then, a chilling sound filled the cabin. An alarm, piercing and shrill, pierced through the shouts, a warning almost primal in nature. It sent a shiver down his spine, and he felt Sophie tighten her grip. "Brace yourselves." The pilot's voice thundered through the intercom, grave and steady. "We're preparing for an emergency landing. Please secure all loose items." An emergency landing. Those words struck Chad like a hammer. They ripped through the haze of uncertainty. Were they truly facing the possibility of a crash? Would they land safely? How could they begin anew if everything around them was crumbling? Doubt gnawed at his resolve as the plane pitched again, sending everyone into chaos. Suddenly, he was yanked back to the present as the overhead bin flung open, spilling luggage everywhere. A backpack hit him in the shoulder, but he barely felt it. Time slowed, and he locked eyes with Sophie, who was now staring straight ahead with panic plastered on her face. That look. It was more than fear, it was terror. The kind that could shatter hearts. Then, in an unexpected flicker of desperation, she whispered, "What if we don't make it out?" The question hung heavily in the cabin, dripping with gravity. It pierced through him, igniting a fierce instinct, to fight against fate, not just for himself, but for Sophie, for the tiny boy, and for a future that felt so precarious. And just as he opened his mouth to reassure her, the plane jolted with a force that sent him sprawling back against the seat, but Chad's mind was racing. Answers had to surface quickly. Just then, he heard a startling noise coming from the cockpit, an alarming crackle that sent his dread spiraling. Suddenly, everything changed as the emergency lights flashed red. Their world was about to unravel. Would they crash hard as fear gripped them? What awaited on the other side of this storm? Would he find the strength to embrace not just the danger but the family he never thought he would have? As the plane lurched again violently, Chad clenched his jaw, adrenaline pumping through his veins. The truth was imminent, and so were revelations that would change everything. The roaring engines drowned out the desperate thoughts swirling in Chad's mind. He fought hard to regain his composure as screams pierced through the cabin, mingling with the frantic clatter of luggage. Each violent shake felt like the plane was trying to toss them into the abyss. That he tightened his grip around Sophie. Every ounce of fear that enveloped them was palpable, like a dense fog. The baby gurgled softly, oblivious to the chaos surrounding him. But keeping that innocence safe felt like a daunting task. "Chad." Sophie's voice broke through his racing heart. "What do we do? They're not prepared for this." Panic was thick in the air, and Chad could feel the weight of uncertainty pressing down on him. "We have to find life vests, or we might be stuck." He had to say it, had to push her into action. The idea of a crash was too terrifying to bear. "Where?" she shouted, tears brimming in her eyes. "Overhead bins. Just look." He pointed, fighting against the noise. As if summoned by his words, another violent lurch of the plane sent Sophie tumbling toward the aisle. Chad lunged forward, grabbing her arm just in time. "Hold on to me. Don't let go." In that moment, it felt like they were suspended in time. The world around them was spiraling into chaos, yet they clung to each other like a lifeline. For him, losing her meant losing everything. Desperate, Chad struggled to pull himself free from the seat. He glanced around, noticing the panic on the faces of their fellow passengers. A man near the front was shouting for calm, but it only fueled the chaos. "Let us make sure he's okay." Sophie pointed desperately at the baby. "We can't let anything happen to him." "Just follow my lead," Chad urged, inching over to the overhead bins. With a swift motion, he flung open a compartment, revealing a jumble of bags. "There has to be something in here." His heart raced as he fumbled through bags, anxiety creeping like ice through his veins. He had to find something, anything, that could help. "Chad, look out!" Sophie screamed out. He whipped around, just as a heavy suitcase flew from a luggage rack, hitting him square in the chest. Pain exploded through him, knocking him backward into the aisle. "Are you all right?" Sophie yelled, worry etched deeply into her features. He gasped, the wind knocked out of him. But he refused to succumb to the pain. "We need to keep moving." Before he could push to his feet, the plane took a sharp nosedive. The cabin tilted almost sideways, and chaos erupted once more. Somewhere, a woman cried out in pure terror. Chad struggled to orient himself, sensing a huge wave of dread rolling through the aircraft. The emergency alarm screamed louder, an ominous siren signaling impending disaster. Suddenly, like a dark horror waiting to unfold, the pilot's voice broke in once more. Prepare for impact. That was it. Soldiers of chaos awoke in Chad. He fought against fear, against the pounding of his heart, now a wild drum echoing in his ears. Time slipped, and as he pushed against the hardness of the aisle, it struck him now was not the time to think about what could happen. It was the time to act. Movement exploded around him. A woman from 2 rows ahead was trying to climb over seats. Another person was praying, murmuring incoherent pleas into the air. Chad, we have to kneel. Sophie shouted, pulling him closer as she protectively huddled the baby against her. Right. He took a deep breath, recalling every safety video he had ever seen. Lower your head. Keep him safe. He never felt this kind of pressure before. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on him, heavier than the suitcases falling all around, yet, somewhere in chaos lay a flicker of hope. They still had each other, and as long as they did, there was a chance. As the cabin erupted in a new wave of despair, Chad felt raw determination rise within him. They may not know what awaited them, but they would fight with everything they had. With one final glance towards Sophie and the baby, Chad breathed deeply, whispering against the storm, "We're getting through this." But as the plane tilted sharply, the shriek of metal on metal echoed. Was it the end or the start of something terrible? And in that echoing silence, a sickening realization hit like a gut punch. It wasn't just their lives at stake, it was the truth behind this entire journey. What secrets lay waiting at the end of this fall? The world outside had slipped away, reduced to a distant murmur as the reality inside the cabin exploded into chaos. Chad squeezed Sophie tighter, the adrenaline coursing through his veins, sharpening his senses. The plane dipped violently again, and a new wave of panic surged through the passengers. Faces twisted in fear, eyes wide with disbelief. This wasn't just turbulence anymore. Somewhere amidst the madness, a few brave souls began to act. One man shouting from the front, trying to organize people. "We need to brace for impact," he yelled, but the words barely registered through the cacophony. Chad's heart pounded in rhythm with the calls for help and the screams of desperation that repainted the scene with more fear. "Chad, we have to move now," Sophie urged, her voice cracking. She looked down at the baby, whose coos were now drowned by frightened wails. "He needs to be protected." Chad nodded, pulling at Sophie with one strong motion. They pushed through the aisle, bodies scrambling around them in an instinctive search for safety. The world warped. It felt like walking against a tide of terror. Farther up, the man trying to regain control let out another shout. "Get in your seats. Brace yourselves." His authority shattered by the rising panic. "Chad." Sophie's cry cut through the noise as she stumbled against another passenger. "Stay close." He reacted, reaching out to steady her. Moving was critical now, but how could they form a plan in this storm? Time slipped through their fingers. Just like everything else in this mad world, the plane took an ominous tilt, and a loud crack echoed through the cabin, metal buckling under unseen pressure. A collective gasp rose. Chad's heart raced. It felt as if the airplane itself was issuing a final warning, a resounding trump of doom. "Did you see that?" A woman next to them yelled. "What's happening?" "No one knows." Chad shouted back, urging Sophie to keep moving. "Just stay together." But a sudden roar erupted from the rear of the plane, louder than anything that had come before. A collective gasp morphed into screams, panic rippling through the crowd like wildfire. Chad's stomach dropped as a fearsome realization struck. Whatever was happening was escalating. "Are we going down?" Sophie's voice was a whisper now, leaving no room for bravado. Chad forced every ounce of courage into his next words. "I don't know. But we have to be ready for anything." He glanced at the emergency exits, pulsing with life, urging him toward them. The exits, the only hope in a moment tainted with dread. But would they even get there? Would the plane hold? He stole another look at Sophie, the baby pressed protectively against her chest. "We'll find a way, I promise," he murmured, trying to reassure not just her but himself as well. As the alarms blared and the plane shuddered violently again, something heavy struck the floor behind them. A passenger must have lost his footing, tumbling into the aisle with a groan. Chad felt his heart lurch. They could be next. "Chad!" Sophie screamed, pointing to something flickering in the back. He turned just in time to see a fire igniting near the engine. Flames danced menacingly, the heat palpable through the cabin. "We're not safe here. We need to get to the exit." His voice was raw. "Go. Now!" Sophie shouted, pushing him forward. With adrenaline pushing them, they stumbled toward the back. The cabin racked with a sound that felt like thunder, rattling their eardrums. And then came the breaking point, a deafening explosion followed by a jolt that sent everyone screaming. Chad's heart raced, the world blurring as they fought their way through. Could they survive this? Would they ever escape? And just as their path opened into the chaos, Chad caught a glimpse of a shadow looming larger amidst the struggle. Was that someone emerging from the flames? Who were they, and what would they bring to the chaos of this desperate situation? Chad's breath caught in his throat as the shadow stepped closer, emerging from the fire like a fiery specter. The flames flickered, illuminating the figure, a man, dressed in a dark suit, his face unfamiliar yet entangled in a chilling recognition. "Chad!" Sophie squeezed his arm, her voice a frantic tremor. "Who is that?" I don't know." He struggled to grasp the shifting reality before him. The figure didn't belong here, in this moment of despair. The man lifted his arm, and Chad's heart raced again as he saw the glint of something metallic in his hand. Was that a weapon? Around them, terrified screams filled the cabin, creating a terrifying choir of despair. "Everyone, listen!" The man shouted, his voice booming over the chaos. "I can help you. But you have to trust me." His eyes flashed with a strange intensity, a mix of authority and desperation. "Why should we trust him?" A voice cried from the back, echoing the doubts rippling through the crowd. Chad exchanged a quick glance with Sophie, whose fear mirrored his own. "He could be dangerous." Chad whispered, scanning the cabin for an exit, and he felt a knot tightening in his gut. Then the figure stepped towards them, flames dancing in his wake. "I'm the only one who can get you out of here," he pressed, an urgency creeping into his tone. "But we need to move. Now." "What do you mean? You can't be serious." A woman near them yelled. "You're just another guy trying to save himself." "Listen!" The man shouted, raising his voice to cut through the noise. He pointed behind him, where flames licked dangerously close to the overhead compartments. "This thing is going down unless we act fast." Chad's instinct screamed at him to run, but something in the man's wild eyes held him captive. Perhaps it was madness, or maybe it was a glimmer of hope in the storm. "Chad, what do we do?" Sophie's grip tightened around the baby, their son, her eyes darting around for answers. He hesitated, calculating, drowning in his own fear. "If we don't move, we're going to die," he finally said, deciding they had no choice. "We trust him for now." With a nod of uncertainty, they moved toward the man, who gestured towards the rear exit. "This way," he commanded, pushing past people, and Chad followed, Sophie close behind. The flames flared brilliantly, smoke stinging his eyes as he made his way past the chaos. The sirens blared, and the cabin was an apocalyptic whirlwind. Escape was within reach, but would they make it? "Keep moving," the man yelled. "Do not look back." But Chad couldn't help himself. His gaze caught a fleeting flash of twisted metal and chaos. What if they were too late? Another explosion rocked the plane, sending everyone stumbling, and Chad found himself flat on the ground, struggling to breathe amidst the cacophony. This was hell, and they were trapped in it. Sophie reached for him, her eyes glistening. "We can't stop. Not now." With a surge of resolve, Chad picked himself up, pulling Sophie upright. "We're getting out of here." The man ahead turned briefly. If you think this is the worst, just wait. His words trailed off into a foreboding silence, leaving a chilling unease lodged in Chad's throat. What did he mean by that? Would they face something even more terrifying once they escaped the burning wreckage? As they reached the exit, a sudden jolt slammed the aircraft again. The cabin bucked, and every soul inside felt the weight of impending doom. Suddenly, the lights flickered. Shadows flickered, and in that brief moment, Chad glimpsed a glint on the man's calmed face. What secrets lay behind those eyes? Nothing could prepare them for what awaited outside. But they had to take the leap. Would it be into freedom or ultimate despair? And before they could take that fateful step, Chad recalled the last warning the man had given, resonating ominously in his mind. You think this is the worst? Now the real question loomed: what happened next? With a final shove, the trio plunged through the exit, gasping as the fiery chaos behind them erupted like a possessed beast. The world outside felt surreal. A tempest of smoke and screams clashed with the stark blue sky above. Chad's heart raced as he hoisted Sophie and their baby into his arms, her tiny frame clutched protectively against his chest. Over here! The man shouted, his silhouette barely visible through the swirling haze. He gestured toward a cluster of survivors that had gathered near an emergency slide. The weight of panic hung thick in the air, and Chad felt it crush down on him. Each scream was a reminder of the desperate race against death they were all part of. They stumbled towards the slide, but chaos devoured reason. People pushed and shoved, frantically trying to escape the encroaching flames. Chad's grip on Sophie tightened as he fought against the tide of bodies, each panic-filled face reflecting his own urgent fear. Sophie gasped, her eyes darting towards the rising smoke as it enveloped the aircraft. What are we going to do? She cried, clutching their baby tighter, her voice a raw edge of terror. Just keep moving. Chad shouted, his voice hoarse. We have to stay together. The man ahead turned back, his eyes startlingly focused. This way. You think it's bad now? Wait till you see what's coming. His warning hung in the air like a storm cloud, and Chad's stomach dropped. What could be worse than fiery death? Just then, a thunderous roar cut through the chaos. Chad froze as he turned toward the sound. Something was falling. A portion of the plane's fuselage broke free, glinting ominously as it plummeted toward them. Get down! The man yelled, and Chad instinctively dove, yanking Sophie beneath him. The roar grew louder, drowned only by their pounding hearts. The impact thundered against the pavement. Dust and debris erupted, a malevolent cloud swallowing them whole. Chad could barely breathe, his chest tight as he shielded Sophie and the baby, who whined softly in his arms. The seconds dragged, elongated by fear. Finally, as the dust settled, Chad slowly raised his head. Around them, survivors clambered for air, coughing and sputtering amid the wreckage. Is everyone okay? He gasped, his voice strained. Panic pricked at the edges of his mind. Part of him wanted to throw Sophie and their child to safety, but he felt rooted to the spot. The man heaved beside them, brushing bits of debris from his suit. We need to move again. He insisted, urgency threading his voice. It's not safe to stay here. We have to get away from the wreckage. Sophie shook her head, her eyes wide and frightened. How do we know you're not leading us into another trap? We don't have time for doubts. The man shot back, his frustration palpable. Just look. Chad followed his gaze. A monstrous beast of a helicopter hovered above, the whirring blades creating an ominous backdrop against the sky. Instinctively, fear coursed through him. What if it was part of the disaster? Listen to me, the man yelled, his ferocity cutting through the buzzing clamor. Those people in the chopper can save us. But we have to get to them now. Without waiting for another word, the man began sprinting towards the scattered group of survivors ahead. They were nothing more than silhouettes against the smoke-stained horizon, but hope urged Chad forward. With a final glance backward at the wreckage that had attempted to claim their lives, Chad rallied his strength. Come on! He shouted to Sophie, adrenaline surging as he propelled them forward. Each hurried step felt precarious, each breath a reminder of their mortality. What if they weren't quick enough? What if it was too late? But before he could shake off the doubt, another explosion ripped through the air, rattling the ground beneath them. Chad stumbled, heart racing, as he sensed ominous shadows crawling closer again. What did he mean? Chad gasped, wild panic swelling within him. The danger wasn't over yet, but what exactly lay ahead? As they ran, uncertainty spiraled around them like a thick fog. And there, lingering at the edge of his mind, Chad felt the weight of one harrowing truth. What price would they ultimately pay for survival? Chad's heart pounded in his chest, urging him onward as they stumbled through the chaos. Flames danced like angry specters behind them, and the dim roar of the helicopter contrasted starkly with the clamor of despair. He tightened his grip on Sophie and the baby, every step echoing with urgency. Over there, he shouted, pointing toward an opening where other survivors gathered, waving frantically. Each face mirrored his own desperation. But as they sprinted forward, another explosion rocked the ground beneath them, sending a fresh wave of panic sweeping through the crowd. Dust and debris spiraled, catching in Chad's throat as he forced himself to breathe, every instinct screaming to escape the inferno behind them. Sophie stumbled slightly, her breath coming in sharp gasps. Chad! What if we don't make it? Her voice trembled, each word laced with raw fear. His chest tightened. We will. He replied fiercely, pulling her closer, channeling every fiber of his being into the promise. We have to believe it. The helicopter whirred menacingly overhead, and Chad caught a glimpse of paramedics readying ropes and harnesses. Time felt elastic, stretched thin yet racing like the seconds before a storm explodes. They reached the cluster of survivors, and a sense of urgency surged within him. We need to get to that chopper, Chad shouted, pointing emphatically. The moment snapped everyone into focus, igniting a renewed burst of energy. He could feel determination claw its way back, igniting a fire in his soul. Stay close to me, he urged as he thrust his way toward the front of the group, instinctively seeking safety for Sophie and their baby. She nodded, eyes glimmering with resolve despite the fear that threatened to engulf them. As they neared the helicopter, the crowd surged forward, broken voices crying out for help, panic returning at the edges. Chad steeled himself, forcing his way through the horde. We can do this, he shouted over the rising din, every syllable punctuated with iron will. Chad, you're hurting me, Sophie cried, but her voice was steady, even as chaos reigned around them. He softened his grip, glancing at her pale face, touched by soot and fear, but within her eyes burned the same fire of hope. The helicopter whirred louder, almost drowning out the noise of the crowd, and Chad felt a sudden sense of connection. It was a lifeline, a chance. He could almost reach out and touch the opportunity in the sky. Just as they made it to the front of the crowd, the helicopter pilot motioned to them. He yelled, eyes fixed on Chad. Get her and the baby on board. Chad felt an overwhelming surge of urgency. He quickly assessed the scene, urging Sophie to step forward. Go. But just then, a shout erupted from the other side of the crowd, and Chad turned. Fear gripped him anew as he noticed a firework of chaos exploding among the shocked mass. A group of desperate survivors fought against each other, willing to claw for a chance at survival. The moment sent Chad reeling. Sophie's hand slipped from his grasp, and panic gripped him. Sophie. No. He shouted, pushing through bodies that suddenly felt menacing, somehow giving life to primal instincts. That in a heart-stopping moment, he caught a glimpse of her as she struggled, a lone figure amidst the chaos, and every protective instinct flared within him. He raced forward, weaving through panic-driven faces, each heartbeat accelerating the urgency to protect. Chad. I'm right here, Sophie's voice called out, but it felt distorted, swallowed by the swarming madness. His heart raced as he pressed onwards, catching brief glimpses of her and the baby in her arms, but every step felt like a mile, each second stretching agonizingly. As flames licked higher behind them, a final push sent adrenaline shooting through him. Sophie. He bellowed, finally reaching her, grabbing her arm, and pulling them towards the helicopter. Another explosion reverberated around them, and a new wave of panic sent everyone scrambling. Chaos reignited, bodies jostled against each other, desperate, all for hope, all for freedom. Chad met Sophie's anxious gaze. "We've got to jump," he yelled, his voice a raw, frantic whisper. With the helicopter blades churning overhead, he wrapped an arm around them, instinctively shielding the baby with every ounce of his being. They charged toward the helicopter, the pilot leaning out. "Hurry!" One last effort propelled them forward, and with every muscle screaming and every second stretching, they leaped, the world tilting, the weight of survival and rebirth melding as they cleared the last barrier. As they were pulled aboard, Chad's breath caught. Clarity and chaos spun together until he realized they were safe together, cradled in the shelter of the helicopter's embrace. Gasping, he looked down at the tiny face peeking from Sophie's arms, their son, the bridge between their past and uncertain future. Then he turned to Sophie, sharing a fleeting smile before the pilot yelled out, urging them to buckle in. "We made it!" she exclaimed, eyes bright despite the ash and fear. Somewhere, the remnants of the plane surrendered to flames, shadows falling into a world now behind them. As the helicopter rose above the wreckage, Chad felt something shift within him, a relentless urge to fight for this new life, this unusual version of family they had been gifted amidst the storm. He glanced over at Sophie, the love and determination lighting her eyes, and then at their baby, the future he once feared now unfolding before them. Maybe turbulence was necessary, they had faced it, and they had survived. Together, he breathed, promising not just to her but to themselves. They were stepping into the unknown, hand in hand, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. So, what will you do now? This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to subscribe immediately to the channel, so you don't miss our next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. I want to hear from every single one of you. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this wild ending. And please, instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who absolutely need to see this conclusion. You need to support the channel and be part of this amazing community.